Dr. Hermann Oberth, who pioneered a rocket design for the German Reich and later for the American manned space launches, once cryptically stated, and I quote, "We cannot take credit for our record advancement in certain scientific fields alone. We have been helped." When asked by whom, he replied, and again I quote, "The people of other worlds." Werner von Braun was a famous German aerospace engineer and spacecraft architect credited with inventing the V-2 rocket for Nazi Germany and the Saturn V for the United States. He echoed similar knowledge of a Nordic-looking extraterrestrial influence when he stated in 1959, and I quote, "We find ourselves faced by powers which are far stronger than hitherto assumed, and whose base is at present unknown to us. More I cannot say at present. We are now engaged in entering into closer contact with those powers, and within 6 or 9 months' time it may be possible to speak with more precision on the matter." Just who were the people of other worlds that both of these esteemed German scientists spoke of so nonchalantly? The medium Maria Orsic was leader of the German Vril Society. In pre-World War II Germany, the Sisters of Vril conducted research into psychic phenomenon, advanced propulsion technology, and this included saucer-shaped aircraft, or UFOs as they're still called by the media 70 years later. The Vril Society, whose members included some who would later become notable members of the Nazi Party, believed that many ancient civilizations owed their origins to refugees from Atlantis. They advanced the idea of a subterranean civilization ruled by an ancient parent race who had mastered technology called Vril, and this breakaway civilization was said to have survived antediluvian cataclysms which ended the Ice Age, and they continued to thrive below the surface of the earth. While it is widely accepted that the Nazis were defeated with Germany's formal surrender in 1945, this is only partly true. The Nazi elite were able to covertly develop craft that were far in advance of anything possessed by the Allies and establish a secret subterranean base in Antarctica, New Schwabenland. New Swabia, or New Schwabenland in German, is an area of Antarctica called Queen Maud Land. It was explored by numerous German Antarctic expeditions, and one in the late 1930s reportedly discovered ice-free areas with warm freshwater lakes and signs of growing vegetation right there in the middle of the barren ice. The Nazi Party proceeded to covertly build a massive secret subterranean base in the large hollow caverns which have naturally formed deep under the Antarctic ice. They continually shipped men, resources, material to the South Pole throughout the war years, and in 1943 the German Navy Grand Admiral Karl Donitz stated that the German submarine fleet is proud of having built for the Führer in another part of the world a Shangri-La, an impregnable fortress. The media is largely controlled by the Rothschild banking dynasty, as everyone knows, and for the most part they promoted a false narrative concerning the events of World War II. Hitler's body was never recovered, and that's why after the Allies claimed unconditional victory, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Forrestal sent a military force known as Operation High Jump to invade Antarctica. And this included Admiral Nimitz, Admiral Cruson, and Admiral Byrd. Over 4,500 military troops from the United States, Britain, and Australia, consisting of 3 naval battle armadas, departed from 3 separate locations in 1946, following the war. Admiral Byrd's command ship led the invasion. It consisted of the icebreaker Northwind, the catapult ship Pine Island, the destroyer Bronson, the aircraft carrier Philippine Sea, the U.S. submarine Senate, 2 support vessels Yankee and Merrick, 2 tankers Canistad and the Capican, the destroyer Henderson, and a float plane ship Karatuk. So Byrd was given unlimited funding and a full 8 months to complete this operation. According to numerous sources, including Admiral Byrd himself, things did not go as planned, and it was a very one-sided affair, with the Antarctic Nazis victorious. Upon returning from a rather swift and, I guess you could say, a humiliating defeat by forces which were supposedly surrendered weeks after Hitler's supposed suicide, we have published interviews where Admiral Byrd stated clearly that it was now, and I quote, necessary for the United States to take defensive actions against enemy air fighters which come from the polar regions. So the United States military and intelligence were not in Antarctica for research or scientific experiments, but they were apparently trying to locate and destroy this immense underground facility that was constructed by the Germans before, during the war, and continued after the war. And it was likely used to further the research conducted by the Nazis and certain secret societies which were developing advanced propulsion technology, advanced aircraft. And these were the same ones used to decimate the Allies in Antarctica, saucer-shaped discs, far in advance of anything possessed by the US. Top secret maps obtained by the KGB, allegedly, and belonging to the Third Reich have been recently leaked on the internet, which, again, allegedly depict passages under the Antarctic ice which were used by these German U-boats to access these mysterious underground polar caverns. The possibility that the Earth contains massive underground caves, caverns, that it's hollow or at least partially hollow, that these regions are accessible through passages at the poles, and that ancient secret breakaway civilizations flourish within them, this has renewed people's interest in a subject that's still largely considered, by the media at least, to be very taboo. And polar expeditions and battles like Operation High Jump still remain classified. And it's just shrouded in secrecy for decades now. But scientific revelations are coming out, they validate the rumors, and these covert events and their implications are finally being exposed. And the Earth might actually have entire civilizations living underground that we, the public, now are just being made aware of.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening. This is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Larry Lasser, CBS News correspondent, and Kenneth Crawford, National Affairs Editor of Newsweek magazine. Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
The North Pole used to be a no-man's land, but these are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. Yet only 60 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
This is a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Well, Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do.
Well, Admiral,
Yeah.
would you say that since you've been to both the extremities of Earth, are these expeditions to such far-off places, are they getting easier because of modern techniques, or is danger still close at hand?
Well, it's a little risky, but nothing like it used to be with the old slow planes and the small cruising radius where we had to put down bases. We replaced the dog teams, and of course that was a big improvement. But now the planes go much faster and they're safer, and they have a much bigger cruising radius. You haven't got the danger of a terribly heavy load.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow.
Is that very definitely planned, or is that...
That is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year, at the bottom of the world, because the government has really become interested.
Well, Admiral Byrd, I can understand, I think everybody can, the interest in the North Pole because it's so near our greatest challenger, Soviet Russia. But why this interest in the bottom of the world? Nobody living down there, is there?
No, it's pretty cold. There's only one permanent resident, that's the emperor penguin. The little ones live further north. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime. Because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources. And, you know, as the world shrinks with an ever-increasing acceleration, far-flung places, once useless, like we thought the North Pole was, and no man's land, become very useful. The bottom of the world will be important, not only to us, but to our allies.
I was going to ask you, does it have military importance?
It has some, and as the world shrinks, it will continue to shrink with an ever-increasing acceleration, thus bringing these places closer. And in the future, I can see a time when it will be very, very important strategically.
Well, has the development of air power increased the strategic importance of places like the
very much
Parma
so.
Peninsula, was it?
Very much so. Even now, if anything happened and we lost the Panama Canal, we would have to control the islands just north of Antarctica, which are part of Antarctica, and between there and Cape Horn.
I've heard it said that there are 7 continents in the world, and one of them has never been seen by a woman, and that's Antarctica. Is that actually true?
Well, if the Power Peninsula is an island, as far as I know, that's true. No woman's ever stepped foot upon the Antarctic continent, and it's the most peaceful place in the world.
Well, I'm sure that won't last very long. I understand now that you're working with the Arnold Bread Company in charge of frozen foods. Now, is there any future for frozen foods down these frozen extremities?
Well, I think the human race can be helped by that. This was thought out by Dean Arnold, who's, in my opinion, a great humanitarian. He learned that we went down there after 4 or 5 years and finished a meal that we had left there on the table when we had evacuated Little America. Everything was perfect, including the bread. So he got the idea of this frozen bread, and already he sent some to Europe, and it worked very well over there for some of the starving people. So you can store it down in the Antarctic, and against the lean years, and you wouldn't have any people in the world really starving if you did that.
Yes, in the event of an atomic war.
You'd stay there forever.
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
Well,
it was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
Is it any secret? Is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go after that stuff down there. Well, you know, I avoided what you said about uranium. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to have the world fighting over the Antarctic.
And Robert, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Well, yes. There are now 7 nations very much interested. Russia is interested tremendously. That I'm sure of. Australia has an expedition down there. The Argentine, the Chile, New Zealand, Britain, and so on. Now, you can understand those people down there being interested because they live down there, the New Zealanders, the Argentinians, the Chileans, and Australians. And so we don't do much about claiming anything.
Admiral, you make us sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
Well, Admiral Byrd, are private expeditions a thing of the past? Is expedition and exploration, making expedition and exploration now purely a government function because of the tremendous cost
No, I
and
don't think
organization?
so. I think down south it may be more or less a thing of the past, but not other expeditions that go. There's a lot of them go north now.
This latest expedition now on the way is a government expedition, I take it.
Yes, that's the government.
However, may I ask you, is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau, 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there. So there's that big difference between the top and bottom of the world. The North really isn't very cold up there on the Arctic Ocean.
Not compared to the South. Admiral Byrd, we often hear it said that our young Americans now aren't as hardy as their forefathers. Do you think that Americans do measure up to the standards, the physical standards and morale standards of the past?
I do. I don't believe that. I think they're just as hardy.
Well, what would you say was the most valuable factor on an expedition? Is it morale, or physical courage, or is it sheer equipment?
Well, I've always thought that loyalty was by far the most important trait. The British told me that when I first went down in 28 that I couldn't possibly get through the winter night without a mutiny if I took more than 20 men. But to serve science, I had to take 42 men. Then I took 56 the next time, and so on. And I did find that loyalty was the most important thing during the winter night when it's very hard on your nerves. I think that's best trait.
Well, that's a very valuable characteristic at any time. Well, thank you very much, Admiral Byrd. It's been a great pleasure to have you here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Yes.
The opinions expressed on the Longines Chronoscope were those of the speakers. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Larry Lasser and Kenneth Crawford.
Hi guys, this is Ed, and welcome to the Outer Dark. Well, there's been a number of very strange things happening around Antarctica lately, since a number of very prominent people this year have made trips to Antarctica. But is there something happening in Antarctica that we don't know about? Well, stay tuned as the Outer Dark brings you 5 things we know about the elites and Antarctica. Number 10. First, some context. Antarctica is a barren, vast region, almost twice the size of the United States, and at the southern hemisphere, south of New Zealand. That is, it's massive. It's a massive, huge landmass, and covered in ice. There is large scrolling reserves of ice-capped mountains and rocky land. But what is the mystery? Well, number 9. It is the weird sequence of events. Since on the 12th of February, Russian Orthodox Church leader Patriarch Kirill met with Roman Catholic Church leader, that is, the Pope, in a historic meeting between the two leaders, something that had not happened in 1,000 years. Let that sink in a moment. Now, this took place on the 12th of February, which is really strange, since straight after, that is only a few days after, on the 18th of February, the Russian Orthodox Church leader, Patriarch Kirill, then flew straight to Antarctica, as you can see here. That is, literally a few days after he met the Pope. But this old man, who's an elderly old man, and a head of a religious movement, that is Patriarch Kirill from Russia, doesn't even take a week or a few weeks to rest from that tiring trip. No, he flies straight to Antarctica. That is, through a labyrinth of airports and stopovers. Number 8. When the Russian Orthodox Church leader arrived in Antarctica, he started acting very strange. He blessed the land and water that surrounded the area. Then he praised the land as a model of humanity. That is the ideal location for humanity. Now think about that for a moment. I mean, Antarctica is a barren wasteland full of rocky mountains and ice. Is that really the ideal place for humanity? John Kerry's flight to Antarctica. That is, out of all the days in the year that John Kerry could fly to Antarctica, he flew on November the 8th, that is election day in the United States, as if he knew something or heard something and he had to arrive in Antarctica immediately. That is, he flew out on the day of the United States presidential elections. Let that sink in, not at any other time of the year, but the day of the elections, when the entire establishment that he serves as a Democrat was on the line. Buzz Aldrin. After John Kerry's visit to Antarctica, which was highly irregular, next you have an astronaut, literally, and not any other astronaut, but also an astronaut that happens to be a 33-degree Freemason and a military insider. Now ask yourself, with all three of these visits combined, does a picture start to emerge that is something major is happening in Antarctica? Because remember, Buzz isn't just an astronaut. Buzz Aldrin, a 33-degree Freemason, represents another group of people, namely the Eye of Providence. That is the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry. So if you needed a report from someone, that is someone that could confirm that something was really happening in Antarctica, like you found something you weren't expecting, then who would you send if you were from the Masonic establishment? You would send none other than Buzz Aldrin. That is someone that has a military background, a background as an astronaut, that is space, and the intelligence sector, as also as someone that is a 33-degree Freemason, that is a lifetime Freemason. Lockheed Martin is now in Antarctica, and they are hiring. And Lockheed Martin doesn't show up to build some pipelines, or to build some beds for some scientists, or maintain runways. They work with SAP programs, that is highly classified departmentalized special access programs for the United States intelligence and military circuit. They are involved in places like Groom Lake, Nevada, and build things like this and this. If they say they're building pipelines, then you know something big is going down. The US spy boss James Clapper has been reported to have made a secret visit to New Zealand, which of course is the gateway to Antarctica. This he did in mid-March, where he met with Prime Minister John Key. So ask yourself, why would the head of the CIA make a visit to the Southern Hemisphere? You don't do this. You do this through diplomats. That is what they're there for. That is trusted people that you can pass intelligence information on. That is, unless you need to see something for yourself with your own eyes. This in itself is a kind of warning sign, at least in my opinion. John Podesta. John Podesta received strange photographs to his email as reported to WikiLeaks. That is, mundane, boring photographs of Antarctica. A number of researchers have speculated that John Podesta's photographs aren't really photographs of Antarctica at all, but contain a hidden message that is either encrypted pictures or a meaning in themselves. As the Moscow Times reported today, Vladimir Putin is also on his way to Antarctica very soon. That is, the second most powerful man in the world is headed to Antarctica at a time full of international conflict, when relations between the United States and Russia, at least on the surface, seem to have a major problem. What does this mean? Well, if you're sending the Secretary of State John Kerry, and maybe perhaps Obama's even been there himself, as some researchers have stated, then who's next? Well, it would be the next most powerful person, Vladimir Putin. It is also worth noting that on October the 22nd, that is of 2016, it was finally reported that the Russians actually found an underground Nazi military base in Antarctica. Just a side note regarding Vladimir Putin, because the territory that the underground Nazi military base is found in Antarctica is controlled by the Russian Federation. And this isn't a conspiracy theory, guys. This was reported widely by newspapers like The Independent, as seen here. And the Nazi military base, that is the underground bunker system, was said to contain relics, that is, at least the Nazis themselves were in pursuit of some kind of relics in Antarctica. So if you read between the lines, that is another very interesting note that's come to light just this year, that is in October. Number one, it's hard to say what's really going on in Antarctica. Is there some kind of base there, some kind of super city for the apocalypse, or maybe ancient ruins that are so shocking the political establishment's freaking out? But what is the evidence really that there is something strange there? Do we have any evidence at all? Well, We have one thing, and that's a very strange satellite image, an image taken from Google Earth. The exact location will be placed in the description, of course, so you can confirm it independently by yourselves. Now, what is this? Take a look. Well, it can't be natural. No matter how you look at this, it is clearly artificial. There is a set of what seem like massive protrusions around the outside of the object, and symmetrical mathematical rows, that is, artificial again. On the surface there is no telling what this could be. The cave behind, however, is 30 meters, or about 100 feet, which makes the opening massive. And if you look at the glacial patterning, that is the size of the object and the ice around it, you can imagine that it's been sitting there for a while. That is, at least we can assume that it hasn't been created this year. But what does this mean? I think it could be two things. Either these are ruins from an ancient civilization of some kind, or they're evidence of something being built fairly recently. What I mean by that is at least in the time period when we could have built such, say, in the last 80 years or so. Either way, you don't build something like this, which looks like a door to a massive underground structure, for no reason. You build it there as a permanent feature, and within a rocky terrain, just as you see here, a kind of bunker or super base. But why is it there? I don't know, guys. I have absolutely no idea. But I do know by this photograph alone that there is something in Antarctica. There is something there, and something has been built. At what time period we can only speculate, and that the elites are going there for a reason. You don't have all these high-profile figures going to Antarctica for no reason, especially from the religious sector, major religious sector, from the heights of power, John Kerry, Vladimir Putin, the director of the CIA, etc., unless there really is something going on in Antarctica.
14th, USA Today reported 91 volcanoes discovered beneath Antarctica's ice. But are they active? This was published also on Forbes, The Verge, Science Alert, and Quartz. Less than a month later, Newsweek carried this article under Opinion, Antarctica. What would happen if all the volcanoes buried beneath the ice erupted? If you do a little digging, this was actually an article that was originally published by The Conversation, academic rigor, journalistic flair, which again, once you dig in, is tied to globalist institutions, universities, and the like. But the question is, why would they even bring this up? Why would they republish this article on Newsweek, even if it's under Opinion, amidst all the chaos here? Now, if you read the article, it doesn't really say that anything is actually happening, that all the volcanoes would have to erupt at once to have some sort of cataclysmic event. But it does make me wonder what is really going on. And now it seems like the thing that's going around is this idea that there are caverns beneath the ice and even life. For example, phonemantra.com published today, Antarctica Mysterious Caves is life exists beneath the ice, which is just terrible grammar. Morning Ticker, scientists shocked by discovery underneath Antarctica ice. airherald.com, Antarctica's mysterious caves might hide life beneath ice. And then this strange website, BABWnews.com, that is buildingabetterworldnews.com, published totally shocking discovery in Antarctica has scientists very excited. And in the article, they claim that there are caverns beneath the ice, caves, if you will, some that are 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And this short article also suggests that scientists found DNA in these caves from plants and animals that can't be found elsewhere. Now, coming from the premise and background that we do on this channel and many channels like it, the prospect of a hollow earth, an underground cavern, or hidden chambers in the earth are topics that we have definitely explored. But with the recent focus and attention back on Antarctica, it does make you wonder, what are they preparing us for? Why have they gotten us into this psychological state as a population? And I would suggest that perhaps they are getting ready to rewrite history in a big way that might involve some sort of prehistoric human race. Some will call it extraterrestrial, but in reality, it's what the Bible talks about in the pre-flood days, the days of Noah, which we are returning to as Jesus stated in Matthew 24. The days when the sons of God mated with the daughters of men and had children called Nephilim, a race of hybrid giants that somehow survived one way or another, whatever your theory may be, after the flood, as it says in Genesis 6. And perhaps we are living in the age when those creatures, entities, gods, whatever you want to call them, might reemerge publicly. And we have to remember that the Vatican probably has known about this and probably has been the center of knowledge about things going on beneath our feet since the time of Jesus. The greatest cover-up of mankind has been led by the church, the ecclesiastical arm. And why wouldn't it? If Jesus Christ is the truth, then it's obvious that the largest institution that bears his name would be the most corrupt in order to deceive. There are a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding Antarctica. Are there pyramids down there? Are there ancient civilizations, ruins? Is it a pathway or a hole into a hollow earth? Is it an ice sheet wall that surrounds us? It's mysterious because not many of us have been there or have the tools to legitimately go explore. But the things that are being reported, not from people who are touting conspiracies, but rather simply the scientific community, at least gives me pause and makes me raise my eyebrows and take a second look at what might be happening. Now, there's a connection with Antarctica and CERN in that they have particle detectors on the ice. Smithsonian.com reported in 2010 looking for neutrinos, nature's ghost particles. And in the article it states to capture these ghost particles, elusive entities they call them, physicists have conducted some extraordinary ambitious experiments so that neutrinos aren't confused with cosmic rays, subatomic particles from outer space that do not penetrate the Earth. Detectors are installed deep underground. Enormous ones have been placed in gold and nickel mines, in tunnels beneath mountains, in the ocean, and in Antarctic ice. These strangely beautiful devices are monuments to humankind's resolve to learn about the universe. And again, this is back in 2010, they introduce this thing called IceCube, which is basically a neutrino telescope. Live Science reported on the same thing in December of 2010, world's largest neutrino observatory built at South Pole. And then The Guardian carried it in 2011, the hunt for neutrinos in the Antarctic. The IceCube project has constructed a large detector in the Antarctic ice to find subatomic particles. It could reveal where cosmic rays come from and their cause. We meet the scientists at the pole. So in this article, it talks about the glass ball in his hands, which is a digital optical module, a DOM. And people have covered this, but it's a healthy reminder of what's going on down there. And it says here in the article, the DOM is an exquisitely sensitive light detector that lies at the heart of what must be one of the most ambitious projects in the history of science. By freezing these modules into the ground around the U.S. Amundsen Scott South Pole Station on the high plain of Antarctica, Klein and his colleagues have turned a cubic kilometer of pristine polar ice into an enormous cosmic observatory. And then later in the article he states, quote, "If we can learn how cosmic rays are produced, we might learn something useful for building accelerators on Earth." Again, this was back in 2011. And then in 2013, phys.org, world's largest particle accelerator IceCube detects first high-energy neutrinos from the cosmos. And again, very humanist in their approach and worldview, the IceCube Neutrino Observatory, a particle detector buried in the Antarctic ice, is a demonstration of the power of the human passion for discovery, where science ingenuity meets technological innovation. And these are some pictures of the DOM that turns a sheet of ice into a particle detector. And then in 2013, Space.com reported neutrino detector finds elusive extraterrestrial particle in major breakthrough. And it says, quote, "For decades, scientists have been searching for ghostly neutrino particles from outer space, and now they have finally found them." And then in 2017, SputnikNews.com, Antarctica's ear, how physicists turned entire continent into particle detector. And basically it talks about how NASA and the National Research Nuclear University and these other places from around the world, they go to Antarctica and they try to help facilitate the discovery of these elusive neutrinos. And this time they sent up air balloons with the hopes that it would find those elusive neutrinos. Quote, American researchers participating in the ANITA project have been searching for these neutrinos for 10 years now, but haven't found any of the particles. However, that doesn't seem to be a problem yet, since a similar project, the High Elevation Auger Telescope, has managed to detect 2 or 3 dozen of the ultra-high energy cosmic rays during decades of continuous operation. So, they've been finding stuff, but not really. And then 2018, Michigan State University, chasing ghost particles from MSU to Antarctica. Now, MSU doesn't really seem to be in a good light right now, with some university professors getting into trouble with some pretty disturbing things, but they have students that are being sent to Antarctica to be part of this whole chasing ghost particles. And then, here we go. 2018, livescience.com, a major physics experiment just detected a particle that shouldn't exist. Now, right from the get-go, how do you detect something that is not supposed to exist? Well, they kind of try to explain it here. Scientists have produced the firmest evidence yet of so-called sterile neutrinos, mysterious particles that pass through matter without interacting with it at all. So how do they detect it if it doesn't interact with matter? Scientists. Okay, so let me read this paragraph for you, okay? This is how crazy it is in the world of science right now, at least what they're telling us, okay? The first hints of these elusive particles turned up decades ago, but after years of dedicated searches, scientists have been unable to find any other evidence for them, with many experiments contradicting these old results. These new results now leave scientists with 2 robust experiments that seem to demonstrate the existence of sterile neutrinos, even as other experiments continue to suggest sterile neutrinos don't exist at all. That means there is something strange happening in the universe that is making humanity's most cutting-edge physics experiments contradict one another. Now, I find that fascinating that we're at this point where these detectors that are, billions of dollars poured in with all these different locations, well, the one in Antarctica, the one made out of the sheet of ice, they're detecting these elusive neutrinos that aren't supposed to exist. And that data is contradicting the data of other particle accelerators who have been trying to recreate or trying to find these elusive particles or evidence of these elusive particles for decades without any success. And so the article goes into a history of it, and it's interesting because it talks about an experiment follow-up at Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, that's the Fermi Lab, located near Chicago, which picked up the hidden particles sent again, and in a paper they stated this, quote, "The new data from Minnie Boone confirms that this tension in the data is real. This data can, to my best knowledge, not be fitted with the standard framework. It requires either new particles, sterile neutrinos, or some kind of symmetry violation." And that's Sabine Hostenfelder, May 31st, 2018. So again, even in the world of science, cutting edge science, they can't figure out what exactly is going on. And apparently, the giant sheet of ice detector is saying, oh yeah, there are these non-particle particles that don't interact with matter, but somehow our giant ice sheet telescope is able to pick them up. And here's the data, and it's being considered in the scientific community because it holds weight. It has scientific significance, or data significance at the very least. So again, is this the beginning of the teardown of materialism? And I'll tie it into this story that we reported on Canary Cry News Talk last week. This is the Telegraph. Yahoo picked it up. Demonic possession is real and victims seeking exorcism should not be ignored. Prominent psychiatrist on The World Beyond. And this was interesting because this was a Princeton and Yale educated mainstream psychiatrist who believes demonic possession is indeed real and said that most of Americans agree with him. Now again, Yahoo picked up this same story and they basically republished this Telegraph article. And the Pope is actually quoted not to hesitate to get people help, exorcisms to address genuine spiritual disturbances. And he described the rite of exorcism as a delicate and necessary ministry, and he said that the exorcist priests must be selected with great care and great prudence. Now, I think this is something that most people aren't paying attention to. But if there is a rise of demonic possession, or at least this change in modern science where contradictions and quantum science together creates this chaotic sci-fi world, because we don't really know from a materialist standpoint what exactly is the foundational building block, because they keep going down and they keep discovering these different layers and different particles and things like that. When it comes to material science, they really have no clue why anything is there to begin with. They just are trying to figure out the how and the what. So in that regard, I think it's interesting that culturally, societally, we are moving back to a more supernatural worldview. And I think it's precisely to create the great deception atmosphere. If you think about it, materialism, the theory of evolution, and just atheism in general created a vacuum, a spiritual vacuum in culture and society. And I think they did it at a time when they knew something like the internet would become available freely and openly to anybody who wants to participate, and the people will love it because it's more free content, it's more, information, it's all this stuff. And so they created the atheistic atmosphere at that time to create that spiritual vacuum in this time when great technological advancements are taking place, and when they have to bring the institutions and the pillars of society back into the supernatural worldview fold. They can control the messaging from top to bottom. And the Vatican leading the way here, being, Catholics and being Christian, quote unquote, and the Pope, who is the first Jesuit Pope, leading the way, saying, hey, we need to deploy these exorcist priests. And my point has been with this, basically he's saying that he needs to have this priest class, this modern day sort of spiritual crusaders who aren't, trying to take over or anything like that, but more so they are these spiritual authorities in exorcism, in getting rid of demons and things like that. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. The Vatican is going to start saying, hey, they're the ones that have this authority. They will deploy the priests, exorcist priests, because they're going to have to be selected with great care and great prudence. And of course, the Vatican will be the one to decide who will fall into that category. But biblically speaking, we have the authority, as believers in Christ, we have the authority to deliver demons in the name of Jesus Christ, in the name of our Father. And so this sort of suggestion that you have to rely on authority, that's New World Order, that's Illuminati, that's totalitarian mindset in the form of religion. And I'm not saying that, they don't have some sort of edge or at least some kind of methodology to really make demons go away. In that moment, they probably do, but it doesn't seem like it's something that is predicated on the power of God. It's more predicated on rituals and procedures, which leads me to believe that it's more in the form of magic or sorcery. But in any case, the reason why I bring this up is because I think, tying this together with the story of Antarctica, materialism, and I've been saying this and people in this community have been saying it for a while, materialism is dying in the institutions. It's philosophically bankrupt. It's now starting to show that it is materially, measurably bankrupt by creating all sorts of contradictions with the highest and most sophisticated machines, investigating creation. I think the vacuum has been created. Now it's time to institute that new spirituality as part of the new world order. And it's going to involve a one world religious sort of system, but it's going to have probably different iterations, different expressions, they will say, of how to deal with this sort of interdimensional reality that we are all being exposed to, which the Bible declared right from the get-go. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. These are entities that are beyond the physical realm, and they seem to be a particular group of elite humans, or perhaps some who are transitioning between human and something else, and they are the ones that think they're receiving these instructions from the gods and then perpetrating it onto the governments through the world banks and everything else. You know, a lot of people look at the carnal pyramid going up towards that all-seeing eye, and they see, you know, the elite group, the bankers, or the Jews, or the Jesuits, or, you know, it's always one group. And certainly things get pretty narrow up at the top, but I truly believe that there is a dark group that we don't see, that we can't identify just through the institutions that are public. I think there are many who are behind them that we never see, that we never hear about, and those are the ones that are really controlling a lot of this stuff, but they are the ones who are being really led by spiritual wickedness, by the principalities and powers that whisper these things into their ears and get them to build the things of Satan, not of God. And so there is a war at hand. It's not a carnal war, though. It's a spiritual war, and we're in the thick of it.